Hello, gunfighters, and welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting and gun-related stuff the right way with God at the center. Gonna try something a little bit different. You guys are probably familiar if you've listened for any length of time. The Better Know a Cartridge episodes. They're kind of short episodes on a pretty particular topic, so I think I'm gonna forego the lengthy bio. Try to abbreviate it. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Pretty succinct. You want to support? Go to Patreon. Should be a link in the show notes. Boom. Let's get into the day's cartridge. So what is the cartridge du jour? The cartridge of the day. I think we're going to talk about the 45-110. Do I have any objections from the audience? I did not hear any, so let's proceed with the 45-110. Now, likely you're familiar with the 45-70. It is a cartridge that just refuses to die. It just keeps going and going. The 45-70. What if it had a big brother? What if the 45-70 hit the gym? What if you shoved some more black powder behind that already beefy cartridge? Well, you might end up with what we're going to talk about today. The 45-110. You may recognize it as the cartridge of Quigly Down Under, or as the cool kids today call him, Quig Dizzle. But seriously, Quigly Down Under is a great movie. I have to wonder how many people today that have like an old Sharps rifle or something that get it recreated and get it in 45-110 is because of Quigly Down Under. It is a fantastic movie. I'm not big on Hollywood. I don't even own a television. But I know Quigly Down Under, and I know it's a good movie. He uses a 45-110. He kills a whole bunch of evil people in that movie. So we must deduce from that 45-110 is awesome. Also, it's such a big cartridge, it's also denoted in inches, which is pretty cool. A 45 by 2 7/8 inches. It's a beefy cartridge. Now, this is largely a hand loader's game today, so I'm going to give you some data, however you want to pronounce that in your vernacular, wherever you live. But the data, I'm looking at a 525 grain bullet. Yeah, I didn't add syllables or numbers to that. Not 52 grains, not 55 grains, 525 grain bullet at 1500 feet a second. Very similar 525 grain bullet at 1555. And this is a low pressure cartridge. Remember, this is a black powder cartridge. You're looking at 26,000 psi to 27,500 psi. You compare that to something like a modern 270, you're looking at 65,000 psi. Very low pressure cartridge. Could you push that hotter in a modern rifle with modern metallurgy designed today, not an old antique Sharps rifle? You probably could. I'm not going to tell you that you should. I don't know if Ruger ever made a number 1 or something in the 45-110. If it was a modern rifle with modern metallurgy, a falling block or something like that, you may very well be able to load it with higher pressure. 27,000 psi is pretty low pressure. And if you're talking reload data, verify this for yourself, but the 110, I believe, originally stood for 110 grains of black powder. Now, black powder is not all homogeneous. It differs from manufacturer to manufacturer, different grades, double F, triple F. I don't know if the black powder we have today would be exactly equivalent to 110 grains, so don't just go load this with 110 grains and think you're ready to rock and roll. You verify that, but I think that's originally what that stood for. So think about that as far as power. The 45-70, which is common today, 70 grains of black powder. The 45-110, 110 grains of black powder. Think about that as a ratio in relationship to power. That if math, I should say not if math is correct. Math is correct. If my calculations are correct, that's a 57% increase in power from the 4570 to the 45110. Did Quigly dislocate his shoulder? That I can't say. It's not in the movie. But that's a lot of power. You might be thinking, well, it's way more powerful than the 4570. But hold your horses. Or your kangaroos if we're still talking Quigly Down Under. Because we're talking black powder loadings, right? The reason those cases are so long is because you load those with black powder. If you're into reloading, you know that. Look at something like a 38 Special. Look at how little the amount of smokeless powder takes up in that case. And there's different volumes. Powder has different volumes. Something like 700X has got a lot more volumes than something like Red Dot. I also know what those are, but even so, you could probably put 10 times the amount of Red Dot in the 38 Special case that a max load calls for. There's much more room in that case than you need for smokeless powder. That's why like the 9mm is a far smaller cartridge, far smaller case, and has more power than the 38 Special. It was designed from jump for smokeless powder. So the power potential of the 4570 versus the 45110 is not limited today by case capacity the way it was on black powder days. It's limited to, honestly, kind of what you want to shoot, because the 4570 already is big enough to kill anything on the continent, anything in the world really. If you're loading it with smokeless powder, it's kind of a moot point. So why the 45-110? Well, because it's cool, right? I don't think anybody is running around hunting today or shooting a Sharps rifle because it's the most practical rifle. Let's be real. They're doing it for old school nostalgia. They're doing it because they want to do it with the technology from days of yore. If you're talking about long range metallic silhouette shooting with black powder, does it have an advantage? Of course. Shooting a very similar bullet at higher velocities, especially the kind of velocities we're talking about here with black powder, that extra black powder makes a difference. If you wanted to, let's say, go on a buffalo hunt, you drew a buffalo tag, and you wanted to just go with like a 375 H&H or something, which is a great cartridge, but you wanted to go with something classic, something from back in the day, and you wanted to go with something other than 4570 or 5070, which is another cool cartridge. The 45-110 is a beast. It's a powerhouse. If you wanted to hunt it with black powder instead of smokeless powder, it will be a good choice. Perhaps you really, really like Quigly Down Under or Tom Selleck. Perhaps you just want to keep a really cool older cartridge alive. And one of the ways to do that is not just have it, but to use it and shoot with it. Now the 45-110 has a lot of very similar cartridges. We talked about the 45-70s. There's also the 45-100, 110, 120. If you move up from the 45-70, I think the 45-110 is probably the most common of those obscure cartridges. If you're looking for something like that, you can still get ammo loaded from the factory for 45-110. In fact, I looked it up before I started the show, and I saw some at Midway USA. That's one of my go-tos. I don't have any sponsors. I don't get any kickback from them, but Midway USA is usually a good place to find shooting supplies, ammo, survival stuff, all kinds of stuff, right? And they have factory ammo listed for 45-110 for the low, low price of $127.99 per 20 rounds. And unlike a lot of other stuff, milk and eggs, I don't think you can blame that on inflation. But it's not so obscure that you can't get factory ammo for it. So if you're not going to reload, you still have an option to shoot 45-110. Anyway, with that, I think that's it. A shorter episode. It's a pretty obscure cartridge. I'm not just going to make stuff up. If you want something even beefier or bigger than the 45-70 and you want to hunt with black powder, and or you just want a historical cartridge that's a little bit more obscure for big game hunting, it certainly is that. A pretty cool cartridge. I think it's kind of cool. They could have just went with the 45-70 for Quigly Down Under, but they went with the 45-110. A really cool cartridge. Anyway, with that, thanks for listening. I will throw in a tactical verse of the day. And whatsoever we ask, we receive of him, because we keep his commandments and do those things that are pleasing in his sight. And this is his commandment, that we should believe on the name of his Son, Jesus. With that, men, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.